You know, we've all seen the movies, the narco kingpin, this mythic figure who seems completely untouchable, ruling over a massive empire. But what happens when the story ends? How do these guys with all this power really go down? Well, I can tell you it is almost never as glamorous as Hollywood makes it seem. So let's dive in and pull apart that myth, one downfall at a time. Okay, let's kick things off with a perfect example. A guy named Amado Carrillo Fuentes, but everyone knew him as the Lord of the Skies. He was the head of the Juarez Cartel, and he got that nickname because he had his own fleet of jets. We're talking Boeing 727s that he used to fly insane amounts of cocaine from Colombia into Mexico. He really was a pioneer, turning drug trafficking into an industrial-scale operation. And running an operation on that scale made him unbelievably rich. I mean, at his absolute peak, his net worth was estimated at $25 billion. That made him one of the wealthiest and most powerful criminals, well, ever. The US and Mexican governments were hunting him relentlessly. But with that kind of cash, you'd figure he could buy his way out of just about anything, right? Wrong. With the law closing in from all sides, Carrillo Fuentes had a wild idea. He'd just disappear by literally getting a new face. So, in 1997, he checked into a hospital for a massive plastic surgery and liposuction session. But something went terribly wrong. He didn't die in some epic shootout. He died right there on the operating table from complications. And this just perfectly sets the stage for our whole discussion. The reality of how these guys die is often way, way stranger than fiction. Of course, sometimes the end is exactly what you'd expect. A full-on, no-holds-barred military assault. This is what happens when a cartel leader gets too big, too bold, and the government finally decides, okay, that's enough, and brings down the hammer with overwhelming force. Just look at the case of Antonio Cardenas Guillen, better known as Tony Tormenta. He was the head of the Gulf Cartel, and he had his own private army protecting him. So when the Mexican government decided to take him out, they didn't just send a squad car. Oh no, they sent a small army. We're talking more than 660 Marines, backed up by helicopters and armored vehicles, all descending on his location. The fight that followed was basically urban warfare. Over 300 grenades exploded in the streets before he was finally cornered and killed. And it was a really similar story for Arturo Beltran Leyva, who they called the boss of bosses. After he turned on El Chapo and kicked off a brutal war, the Mexican Navy tracked him to a fancy apartment complex. And look at the force they brought to the party. 200 Marines, tanks, helicopters. They literally had special forces guys rappelling down the side of the building. A massive 90-minute gun battle broke out, and that was the end for him. So the lesson here is pretty clear. When the state truly decides you're done, they can bring a level of power that is almost impossible to survive. And you can't talk about this without mentioning the most famous takedown of all, Pablo Escobar. After he just walked out of his custom-built luxury prison, the entire country of Colombia, with a lot of help from US surveillance tech and even his own enemies, launched a massive manhunt. But in the end, after all that, it was a simple, desperate phone call to his family that gave away his location. And that led directly to that legendary final shootout on a rooftop in Medellin. But here's the thing, brute force isn't the only way these empires fall apart. Sometimes the deadliest attack doesn't come from an army outside, but from a supposed friend on the inside. Which brings us to our next theme, betrayal. Because in this world, the person you trust the most is often the one you should fear the most. Just picture this scene for a second. Pacho Herrera, one of the top dogs in the Cali cartel, is doing time in a Colombian prison. But, you know, he's feeling pretty safe. He's surrounded by his guys. He's even enjoying a game of soccer out in the prison yard. Then, during the game, this man walks onto the field. And it's not some rival or an enemy. It's a close associate, a guy who had been an advisor to Herrera for years. So nobody's alarmed. There's absolutely no sense of danger. In fact, Herrera sees him, stops the game, and walks over to greet him like an old friend. They meet in the middle of the field and give each other a hug. Just a casual moment between two colleagues. And in that exact moment, in the middle of that embrace, the advisor pulls out a pistol and shoots Herrera 7 times in the head. The ultimate betrayal carried out by someone he trusted completely in a place he thought was safe. And that kind of treachery happens in other ways too. Take Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha, El Mexicano, a super violent leader in the Medellin cartel. He was being hunted by everybody. But his downfall was orchestrated in the shadows. His location was given to the police by an informant. But here's the twist. That informant was secretly being paid by his biggest rivals, the Cali cartel.
So he wasn't just taken down by the cops, he was taken down by the strategic, cold-blooded betrayal of his enemies.
Okay, so we've had the military assaults, and we've had the backstabbing. Now we get to my favorite category, the endings that aren't just violent, but are deeply, darkly ironic. These are the deaths that feel like the punchline to some cosmic joke, and they completely destroy any idea of a glorious criminal life. First, let's just make sure we're all on the same page with a key concept. The motorcycle drive-by. It's a classic cartel move. An assassin on a motorcycle rides up, shoots the target, and then just melts back into traffic and disappears. It's brutally efficient and totally terrifying. So keeping that in mind, let's talk about the fate of Griselda Blanco, the godmother of cocaine. She was a true pioneer back in the Miami drug wars, and she is widely credited with perfecting and popularizing this exact assassination technique. So fast forward decades later, she's 69 years old, supposedly retired, and she's just walking out of a butcher shop in Colombia. A man on a motorcycle pulls up and shoots her twice in the head. She was killed by the very method that she helped create. The irony is just staggering. And the irony can get even more surreal. Think about Francisco Rafael Arellano Felix, the oldest brother of the infamous Tijuana Cartel. He'd been out of the game for years. He's down in Los Cabos, surrounded by his friends and family, having a great time at his own 64th birthday party. An assassin walks right up to him and shoots him, point blank. Now, how did a killer get so close without anyone noticing? Simple. He was disguised as a party clown. I'm not making this up. A once feared narco boss was assassinated in the middle of his own birthday party by a killer in full clown makeup. And get this, his brother Ramon, the cartel's most brutal enforcer, a guy known for extreme violence, his end was almost the complete opposite. He was one of the most wanted men in Mexico, and yet his downfall came during a routine traffic stop. He tried to pull a gun on the cop fired back, and they both died right there on the side of the road. One of the most violent men in the country, taken out by a regular beat cop. And for the final, truly bizarre twist, you have to hear the story of Heriberto Lascano, El Lasga, the sadistic founder of Los Zetas. In 2012, Mexican Marines killed him in a shootout, which was a huge win for them. But the story doesn't stop there. The very next day, a team of his own gunmen stormed a funeral home, overpowered the staff, and stole his body. To this day, his corpse has never been found. He was killed by the state, but his men made sure the state didn't get the final say. So when you look at all these stories, from the brutally straightforward to the bizarrely ironic, a really clear pattern starts to show up. Even though the paths these people walked were incredibly different, they all ended up in the exact same place. I mean, this table just lays it all out, doesn't it? The Lord of the Skies dies on an operating table. A warlord like Tony Tormenta gets taken out by a full-scale military invasion. Pacho Herrera gets murdered by a guy he trusted. Griselda Blanco gets a taste of her own medicine, and the so-called king of cocaine dies barefoot on a rooftop. The details change, but the violent ending, that stays the same. So here's the real takeaway from all of this. The myth of the untouchable kingpin who gets to ride off into the sunset, it's just that, a myth. All that money and all that power, it's temporary. The reality of that life is an ending that is almost always violent, way too soon, and often just plain undignified. There's no retirement plan. But this leaves us with one last, pretty unsettling question. We've seen how all these individuals meet their end, but the criminal organizations they build, they often live on. So when one kingpin is inevitably taken off the board, who's already waiting in the shadows, ready to take their place?